Whisper Creek, Wyoming Territory, 1880, rose beneath a washed-out dawn that seemed reluctant to brighten. Frost clung to the freight platform, turning every breath into a pale ghost drifting through the air. The townsfolk had gathered for the morning train, but it wasn't the iron engine drawing their attention. It was the suffering laid bare on the frozen planks. Eliza Harrow was dragged forward by the wrist, half limp, her body racked with the final agony of labor. Walter Vail, her foreman, her captor, jerked her arm so sharply she stumbled and fell to her knees. A painful cry tore from her throat. She clutched her belly, breath broken. Blood speckled the hem of her dress. Walter raised his voice for the crowd. "She's birthing now. Ain't got the feed or patience for another mouth. Mother and brat, best offer takes 'em both." A few men shifted uneasily. Women looked away. One boy whispered to his father, only to be shushed into silence. No one wanted to witness this truth, that the West could be cruel without shame. Eliza collapsed onto her side. The birth overtook her, raw, agonizing, inevitable. In the cold dirt beside the crates, she delivered her baby alone. A daughter, tiny, fragile. The newborn's cry was barely more than a whimper. Walter crouched, inspected the child as if checking a horse's teeth, and snorted. "Barely worth keeping. Someone buy him or step aside." No one moved, except one. A tall rancher with dust on his coat and a rifle slung across his back stepped forward. Oscar Merrick, known for his silence, his solitude, and a gaze that warned men not to cross him, held out a pouch of gold, the clink unmistakable. $300. Walter's eyes widened. "You serious?" Oscar's voice was low. "I am." Walter seized the pouch greedily. "Fine, take 'em." As he turned away, Oscar knelt beside Eliza. His hands were steady as he gathered both mother and child into his arms. Eliza flinched weakly, whispering, "Don't touch me." "I won't," he murmured. "Not unless you fall." Her vision blurred. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was Oscar's quiet promise. "The only thing I want from you is rest." Beyond the platform, the wind shifted, carrying with it the sense that Walter Vail wasn't done yet. Oscar settled Eliza carefully in front of him on his horse, cradling her weight without pressing against her. The child lay bundled in her mother's limp arms. Whisper Creek shrank behind them, the platform receding into the pale morning light. "You paid $300 for trash," Walter called after them. Not loud enough to provoke a fight, just loud enough to plant poison. Several men heard it. They'd remember. A foreman like Walter didn't let go of anger easily. Eliza stirred faintly, mumbling, "Don't. Please don't." "I'm not touching you," Oscar said softly, guiding the reins with one hand and bracing Eliza from falling with the other. "You're safe." She didn't answer. She drifted somewhere between consciousness and fever, her trembling body warm against his arm. The baby gave a thin cry, weak but living. Oscar rode steadily across the valley, snow crunching beneath the horse's hooves. Pines rose like dark sentinels along the ridge. The wind carried the scent of a storm forming far to the west. Oscar glanced at it. Bad timing. But he rode on. After a while, Eliza forced her eyes open. "Why? Why did you pay for me?" He hesitated. "Because someone should have." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." She turned her head slightly, pain etched on her face. "Men don't pay for women to let them rest." Oscar's jaw tightened. "I do." Her gaze flickered with disbelief, but exhaustion pulled her downward again. Oscar kept the horse steady, mindful of every jolt. His silence wasn't cold. It was careful, cautious, the way a man behaved when words failed where action mattered more. A mile back, unseen behind a stand of scrub pine, Walter Vail watched their retreating figures. He spat into the snow. "She ain't free," he muttered. and that gold is mine twice over." Beside him, one of his men asked, "We follow?" "Not today," Walter said, "but soon." The storm rolled slowly toward the valley as Oscar carried Eliza and her newborn toward the only place he still believed he could keep someone safe. Eliza woke to warmth, a feeling so foreign she recoiled from it. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. Pine-scented air drifted through the cabin. She lay on a cot with a clean quilt beneath her. Her child slept beside her in a small cradle, swaddled in soft cloth. Fear surged. She pushed herself upright, hissing at the pain. The door opened. Oscar stepped inside carrying a bucket of warm water and a handful of linens. He froze when he saw her awake. "You shouldn't sit up yet." "Where am I?" Her voice rasped like torn paper. She scanned the cabin quickly. One room, one door, no way out except past him. "My ranch," Oscar answered. "This cabin's yours. No one goes in unless you let 'em." Eliza's hand inched toward the nearest object, a wooden bowl she could use as a weapon. "Why bring me here? What do you want from me?" "Nothing you don't choose to give." Her breath hitched with disbelief. "I'll kill you if you touch me." "I know," he replied gently. "Sleep, heal, that's all." Oscar set the linens down and stepped back, giving her space as though distance was the only kindness he knew how to offer. "I built that cradle this morning," he said softly. "Don't know much about babies, but figured she'd need a place." Eliza swallowed hard. The cradle was handmade from polished pine, its edges smoothed intentionally. Someone had spent hours on it. She looked at her daughter. "Mercy," she whispered. "Her name is Mercy." Oscar nodded. "Good name." The wind howled outside, rattling the window. Eliza flinched. Her mind spiraled with fear. Men who offered gifts often demanded something later. And Walter had never let her rest for long. Oscar misread her fear. "You're safe here. No one will come through that door without your say-so." She didn't believe safety existed, not truly. But the fire warmed the room. Mercy slept peacefully. And for now, Oscar gave her space. He moved to leave. "I'll be in the barn. Call if you need anything." Eliza watched him step into the cold. She waited for the slam of a lock, for the click of a bolt. But none came. The silence frightened her more than chains ever had. Night came on fast, swallowing what little daylight winter had allowed. Eliza lay half awake, her body heavy with fatigue, when she sensed something wrong. Mercy lay against her chest, too warm, too still. Eliza placed trembling fingers beneath the baby's nose. Barely a breath. "No," she whispered, terror pouring into her veins. "Mercy, stay with me." She wrapped the child tightly and stumbled outside. Cold air slammed into her lungs. Snow had begun to fall, thin, sharp flakes that stung her face. The barn lantern flickered in the distance. "Oscar!" she cried, her voice cracking. He appeared instantly, coat half-buttoned, eyes widening as he saw the baby's limp form. "What's wrong?" "She can't breathe." He took Mercy with unbelievable gentleness. Determination hardened his features. "There's a doctor upriver. 10 miles. "It's snowing," Eliza said desperately. "You'll freeze." "Better me than her." He shrugged off his cloak and wrapped it around Mercy before handing her back. "Keep the fire high. Don't let her get colder." Eliza's fingers curled around his arm before she could stop herself. "Come back to us." Oscar nodded once. "I will." He mounted his horse and rode toward the storm. Snow swallowed him within seconds. Hours crawled by. Eliza kept the fire raging, fed Mercy warm cloth, prayed to a God she no longer trusted. Her thoughts spiraled dark. If Mercy dies, what's left for me? She fought the despair with clenched teeth. Long past midnight, hooves thudded outside. The door burst open and Oscar stepped in, shaking violently, face pale and lips blue. He held out a small bottle. "Doctor says this'll help." His hands trembled so hard he nearly dropped it. Eliza uncorked the bottle and let a few drops fall onto Mercy's tongue. The infant swallowed slowly, her chest rising a little fuller than before. Eliza let out a sob, the sound of a mother returning to life. But outside, beyond the storm, a darker wind was rising. By dawn, Mercy's breathing had steadied. Her fever faded, though her small body remained fragile in Eliza's arms. The cabin still smelled of snow-damp wool, fear, and smoke. Eliza sat near the fire, watching Mercy sleep, her fingers brushing the baby's chest every few breaths. Outside, Oscar paced the yard restlessly. Even through the wall, she could sense his exhaustion. Each step heavy, each breath visible in the icy air. Something about the storm ride had shaken him more deeply than he showed. Not just fear for Mercy. Something older, something buried. Eliza wrapped a shawl around herself and stepped outside. Oscar stood beside the fence, leaning on the rail as though the night had weighed him down. "You should sleep," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "Can't." She approached cautiously, the wind catching the loose strands of her hair. Oscar's face had a haunted stillness. Frost clung to his lashes. He looked somewhere beyond the barn, into memories no man ought to face alone. "It wasn't just Mercy, was it?" she asked. His jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "I had a sister once," he murmured. "Lena. Younger than me by 5 years. She followed me everywhere, trusted me for everything." His voice thickened. "A man took her. Someone I knew. Someone I thought I could rely on." Eliza's breath caught. "What happened?" "I was too late." He swallowed hard, fighting the memory. "After that, my voice didn't seem fit for shouting anymore. Didn't feel right to speak loud when I couldn't protect her." Eliza felt her chest tighten with a strange ache. Not pity, but a shared understanding of grief that shaped a person's bones. "You're not responsible for what others do." He shook his head. "I was supposed to keep her safe. Failed her. Won't fail again." Eliza stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat of him through the cold air. "You didn't fail, Mercy." He finally lifted his gaze to hers. "I'd have died before leaving her out there." "And me?" she whispered before she could stop herself. Oscar's breath hitched, barely, but enough for her to see. "You too," he said quietly. "You especially." Eliza's heart stuttered. Before she could respond, distant hoofbeats echoed across the ridge. Walter was coming back. The hoofbeats grew louder, crunching over frozen earth. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, Walter Vale at the front, his bulk unmistakable even through the swirling snow. 2 armed men flanked him, rifles resting casually across their saddles. Oscar moved instinctively, stepping in front of Eliza. The shift was small but absolute. He reached inside the barn and retrieved the shotgun he'd kept ready since the platform. Walter halted a few yards from the porch. "Merrick," he called, voice carrying easy arrogance. "Heard you stole property that doesn't belong to you." Eliza stiffened. Mercy whimpered against her shoulder. "She's not property," Oscar replied calmly. Walter smirked. "That contract says otherwise, and $300 ain't enough to buy off the company." He eyed Oscar with growing malice. "Matter of fact, I ain't sure you got the right to be keeping goods that ain't yours." Eliza flinched at the word, goods. Oscar didn't so much as blink. "She's free here," one of the hired men snorted. "The hell she is." Oscar lifted the shotgun, not threatening, just prepared. "Go home, Walter." Walter's grin stretched. You think you're the first man tried to play hero out here? His gaze shifted to Eliza. What did he promise you, girl? A warm bed? Food? You can't feed that baby without working, and you still owe me labor. Eliza's stomach twisted. Memories of Walter's blows flashed. The nights she'd worked until her legs buckled. The times he'd told her the West belonged to men who took what they wanted. Oscar's voice cut through her fear. She owes you nothing. Walter spat into the snow. That ain't what the papers say. Your papers don't matter, Oscar said. Not here. The hired men nudged their horses forward. Oscar cocked his shotgun with a soft click that echoed louder than thunder. Leave, he said. The quiet firmness in his voice made the armed men hesitate. Walter glared at Oscar, then at Eliza. This ain't over. You think you can hide her forever? We'll see what the judge says. He reined his horse sharply, the others following as they retreated toward the ridge. Eliza let out a shaky breath. They'll come back. I know, Oscar said. But so will I. He stepped past her then, gently lifting Mercy from her arms. She's shaking, he said softly. Let me help. Eliza froze, but didn't stop him. For the first time, she didn't feel alone. The winter night settled heavy across the ranch, stars muffled by thick clouds. Eliza tucked Mercy into the quilt-lined cradle, though fear kept her heart racing too fast to sleep. Every gust of wind sounded like hoofbeats. Every creak of the cabin floor made her breath hitch. She paced the small room, glancing toward the door every few minutes. Finally, exhaustion pressed hard enough that she sat on the edge of the cot, Mercy in her arms, the baby's soft breaths a fragile comfort. A faint glow flickered outside the window. Eliza stiffened, heart leaping in panic. She walked to the frosted glass cautiously. What she saw made her breath falter. Oscar sat in the snow just beyond her porch, his lantern set beside him, rifle resting across his knees. The golden circle of light haloed him in a soft glow, breath misting in the cold. He wasn't pacing, he wasn't restless. He was simply there, watching, waiting, guarding. Eliza pressed her fingers to the glass. Why would a man sit out in the cold for a woman who barely trusted him? Mercy made a small noise. Eliza held her closer, feeling the baby's tiny heartbeat. She stepped outside despite the cold. Oscar, she whispered. He turned slightly. You should be inside. So should you. He shook his head gently. I said I'd keep you safe. You don't have to do this, she said, though her voice betrayed something else. Something trembling and hopeful. I know. The words cracked something inside her that had been locked away for years. She sat down on the top porch step, leaving space between them. They were silent for a while, the lantern flickering softly. Eliza looked at him. Why do you care so much? Oscar kept his eyes on the dark ridge. Because no one cared when they should have. Eliza swallowed, throat tight. I don't know how to trust this. You don't need to, Oscar said softly. Just rest. She didn't rest yet, but something fragile inside her began to settle. Mercy woke, reaching toward Oscar with a small, curious hand. Her tiny fingers brushed his coat sleeve. Eliza saw Oscar's breath catch. Mercy had chosen him. First, and without fear. Morning seeped gently across the valley, casting muted light through the cabin window. Eliza had slept only in fragments, but for the first time she did not wake in terror. Mercy stirred in her arms, hungry and fussing softly. A knock sounded, gentle, deliberate. Can I come in? Oscar asked through the door. Eliza hesitated, then pulled it open. Oscar stood there with his hat in one hand and a small wooden rattle in the other. Its handle was carved smoothly, the top painted with careful swirls. I made this last night, he said. Didn't know if she'd like it. Eliza's breath caught. Mercy blinked up at the gift, then grabbed for it with a tiny, determined hand. Oscar smiled faintly, stunned. Guess that's a yes. Mercy fussed again. Eliza moved toward the hearth to warm milk but swayed slightly, her exhaustion catching up with her. Oscar stepped forward instinctively. Here, he said quietly. Let me. Eliza tensed. Then slowly, so slowly she barely trusted herself, she handed Mercy to him. Oscar held the baby with reverence, positioning her securely in the crook of his arm. His breath hitched as Mercy's fingers curled around the edge of his coat. She trusts you, Eliza murmured. I don't know why, Oscar whispered, eyes fixed on Mercy's tiny face. Because she can feel when someone means no harm. Oscar swallowed hard. I don't deserve that. Eliza looked at him, really looked, seeing past the quiet man to the wounds he carried. You deserve more than you think. Before he could reply, Mercy burbled a small laugh, the first sound of joy she had ever made. The moment hit Oscar like a blow. He lifted one trembling hand and brushed a fingertip along the baby's cheek, as though committing the sensation to memory. Eliza felt something inside her unclench. A knot that had been there since childhood finally loosened. Oscar, she said gently, thank you. He shook his head. You don't owe me thanks. But she did. Not for the roof, not for the fire, but for the safety, the quiet, the watchful lantern, the storm ride. Mercy reached toward Oscar's face. He leaned in, letting her touch him. A child's touch, small, innocent, unafraid, sealed something unspoken between them, something they weren't quite ready to name. Winter loosened its fist on Whisper Creek, but the air still held a sharp edge. Patches of snow clung to the shadowed hollows, while the fields began to show brown earth beneath. Eliza had just finished hanging damp linens on the line when the sound of multiple riders cut through the stillness. Her blood chilled. Oscar stepped out from the barn, eyes narrowing. Inside, he said quietly to Eliza. She scooped Mercy into her arms and retreated to the cabin door, leaving it open just a crack. Walter Vale rode into the yard again, but this time he was not alone. Beside him sat a thick-set man in a black coat and crumpled collar, a judge's sash half visible beneath his outer layer. Two armed men trailed behind, their rifles held too casually to be anything but a threat. Walter swung down with exaggerated ease. "Morning, Merrick," he drawled. "Brought the law with me, seeing as you didn't take the hint last time." The judge dismounted more carefully, pulling out a folded sheaf of papers. "I am Judge Hollis," he announced. "I'm here to see to a dispute over property." Eliza's fingers tightened around Mercy. Property. Oscar stepped off the porch, shotgun relaxed in his hands but ready. "There's no dispute. She's not property." Walter smirked. "Contract says otherwise. Hollis here signed off on it. Her indenture belongs to the company. You paying a few coins in the dirt don't change that." The judge unfolded the papers with bored authority. "These terms are clear. The woman is company-bound. Removing her from her employer constitutes theft." Eliza trembled. Mercy began to whimper, sensing her mother's fear. The small sound pierced the tense air. Oscar glanced back toward the cabin, hearing Mercy's cry, and something in his gaze hardened. "Your paper lies," he said evenly. "She bled for you. You sold her anyway. That isn't law. That's cruelty." "Like cruelty ever stopped the world turning," Walter snapped. He flicked his hand at the gunman. "Take her." The first rider nudged his horse forward. Oscar moved in a single, fluid step, placing himself squarely between the cabin and the men. "You cross this yard," he said quietly, "and you'd best say your prayers first." The gunman laughed and reached for his rifle. The moment broke like a struck match. The gunman's hand closed around his rifle stock, Oscar fired first. The shotgun roared, bucking against his shoulder. The blast sent the man tumbling from the saddle with a cry, his rifle spinning into the dirt. The horses spooked, hooves tearing up the yard as chaos exploded in the cold air. The second gunman swung his barrel toward Oscar. From the doorway, Mercy let out a sharp, terrified wail. The sound struck Eliza straight through the chest. She saw the muzzle swing toward the man who had ridden through a blizzard for her child, who had sat in the snow outside her cabin with a lantern, who had stood between her and every threat that came. Her hands moved before fear could stop them. She seized the revolver Oscar kept by the door, the one he'd taught her to load and hold. She stepped out onto the porch, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the wind. "Stop!" she screamed. She fired a shot into the air beside the second gunman's horse. The crack split the yard like a lightning strike. The startled animal reared, nearly unseating its rider. The man swore, losing his aim. Walter cursed. "You fools! She's one woman." He never finished. A sharp, strangled sound escaped Oscar's throat. Eliza turned in time to see him stagger. Hand pressed to his side where a bullet had grazed and torn flesh. Blood seeped between his fingers, bright and frightening. "Oscar!" Eliza cried. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched. The judge, seeing things tilt away from his favor, reined back. "This is more trouble than it's worth," he muttered. He turned his horse sharply. "I want no part in this." Walter's face contorted with rage as the judge rode off. He glared at Eliza, at Oscar, at the crying child clutched to her chest. "You think you've won?" he spat. "I'll find another way. People like you don't stay safe for long." He jerked his reins and galloped after the judge, the last gunman scrambling to follow. Silence crashed down. Eliza dropped to Oscar's side, Mercy sobbing into her shoulder. "Stay with me," she begged, pressing her hand over his. His skin burned with fever and pain. "You shot true," he rasped, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Don't talk. Don't you dare talk like you're leaving." For the first time, Eliza realized the truth. She was more afraid of losing him than of any man who had ever owned her. The hours after the standoff blurred into a haze of blood, heat, and stubborn breath. Eliza cleaned Oscar's wound with shaking hands, cursing quietly when he tried to push her away. "You should go," he muttered through clenched teeth. "Walter might come back. You and Mercy should run." "No," she snapped, surprising them both. "I am finished running." She stitched the shallow but ugly wound as best she could, using what Oscar kept in a small tin for emergencies. Mercy lay in the cradle, fussing until Oscar, half-conscious, told her in a hoarse whisper, "Hush now, little fighter. Mama needs both hands." Night brought fever. Oscar tossed restlessly, mumbling words that cut into Eliza's heart. "I'm sorry, Lena. I was late. I failed you." She wiped his brow with cool cloths, listening as the name returned again and again. His sister, the ghost he carried, the reason he believed he didn't deserve another chance to protect anyone. At one point he grabbed her wrist, fingers hot and desperate. "Eliza, if I don't make it—" "Stop," she whispered, voice breaking. "You will." "If I don't," he persisted weakly, "promise you'll find a place where Mercy can laugh. Somewhere she ain't looking over her shoulder." Eliza's vision blurred with tears. "She's already there." He stared at her, trying to focus. "You don't owe me anything. You could leave tonight. Take the horse. Take what food you need." "I'm not leaving," she said fiercely. "Not again. Not from a man who sits outside my window all night just so I can sleep." His grip loosened. "I don't want to drag you down. I already failed one girl I loved." "Then don't fail us," she replied softly. "Stay. Fight this. Live." It was the first time she had used the word us. Dawn came slow and gray. When Oscar's fever finally broke, Eliza slumped forward, her head resting on the edge of the cot, Mercy's hand reaching from the cradle to brush the edge of her sleeve. Oscar woke to that sight, mother and child leaning toward him, drawn unconsciously closer. He closed his eyes again. Not in surrender this time, but in a quiet, fragile peace.